Okay, so this is an impromptu live just because I don't feel like pre-recording this. It's going to be audio only. This will be a part of a 3 or 4 part series. I will probably do 1 or 2 parts here on YouTube depending on how it goes, how long. It's going to be probably lengthy, so I'm not sure how many parts I want to break it up into. I will finish it, however, on my Patreon because we're going to be looking at the cause, patterns, and phases of social revolution. And so I don't mind looking at the causes. I don't mind getting into the patterns and phases, but I don't know that I want to do all that on YouTube. So what I will do is I will go ahead and I'm going to just start into a little conversation about this. And so yeah, just come along for the ride. It's late at night. I will not be looking at the chat. I'll kind of just be going into this. I'll probably end rather abruptly. And then the other parts will be coming up whenever they come up, whenever I get around to it, y'all. But let's go ahead and dig in. So popular uprisings are as old as history. In classical Greece, revolutions were considered a normal way of assuming power by differing regiments. And this is essential because I'm always using Europe as an example, the way that they do, and I know people don't like it when I use this verbiage, when they are unhappy with their leaders, they simply kill them violently. That's what they do. That's the European history. Revolution occurs whenever a democratic, monarchic, oligarchic regimen alternates in power, alternates in the assuming of power. The alteration of political power often historically in Europe came through violence. Yet not all political thinkers of that time believed that revolutions were a permanent aspect of politics. Why is it relevant that we understand this? Because we live in the Western world. So a lot of times I talk about how revolution is quelled in the Western world, and we're about to get into where our modern structure, our modern governmental structure, financial structure, why it is the way that it is, okay? Not all political thinkers of the time believed that revolutions were a permanent aspect of politics. Aristotle, for example, he argued that the most stable political system was neither a democracy or an oligarchy, nor a monarchy, but a combination of all three. This is what it would look like. Aristotle believed a stable political system would have a large middle class. The middle class would be a hybrid class, which would take the advantage of having the wisdom and wealth of the oligarchy and monarchy, but would consist of the greatest number of people, as was the case in a democracy. In other words, when property and power are widely distributed amongst individuals of a given society, there would be no reason to ignite revolution. Listen to this. Aristotle, one of the Western world's most held philosophers, he saw that the way to quell revolution was to keep people comfortable. So when we think about social safety nets, we think about credit cards, when we think about loans, when we think about how we're able to purchase things, although you have nothing, when we think about the ability to live a comfortable life and entertainment, when we think about the distribution of wealth that we have, understand that that is built on a model that is designed to pacify. Because, in the words of their own, and by they I mean the Western leaders, of their own philosophers, when property and power are widely distributed amongst individuals of a given society, there will be no good reason to ignite revolution. Why would you bother if you're comfortable? Indeed, modern industrial democracies, which have a large middle class, seem to be politically stable. This is how to maintain power, is comfort. Never let people get too uncomfortable. That's why they'll never end welfare. That's why they'll never stop social safety nets. That's why you will always be able to get a credit card. And your bank will always let you go overdrawn. That's why you will always be able to catch a cheap meal at McDonald's. Because it keeps things politically stable. If you can buy cheap clothes that are going to fall apart in a month, but you're shopping, you look cute. Because with a large middle class that is a hybrid class, there is political stability. So this evidence suggests that Aristotle's theory has stood the test of time. He perfected the art of perpetual submissiveness. Social scientists have long debated the factors responsible for revolution, yet there seems to be no clear agreement. Some stress the importance of economic factors, others emphasize political reasons, still others rely on social detriments. Furthermore, interstate politics and distribution of power are assumed to play some role. However, if we take a synthetic approach, we could argue that a combination of economic, political, and social, as well as external factors, are responsible for the onset of social revolutions. Speaking specifically to the paper that we're referring to, the hypothesis is that below mid-level economic development, non-democratic regimen, and state ineffectiveness are the three most important variables that affect the probability of onset revolutions. Let's take a look at that again. The hypothesis that we're moving forward with is that below mid-level economic development, non-democratic regimen, and state ineffectiveness are three of the most important variables that affect the probability of onset revolutions. Why? Economic development can lead individuals and groups to demand political reform and can be the cause of economic discontent. Established democratic regimens, with their pragmatic and inclusive approaches to politics, also seem to influence more political stability than autocratic or authoritarian systems. Additionally, the level of state effectiveness, aside from regimen type, seems to influence political violence. How the state addresses the demands of its people for political reforms and economic welfare, as well as how the state uses its coercive force. Oh, look at that, y'all. We're getting back into our lesson on power exchange, healthy power exchange. Coercive force. How the state addresses the demands of its people for political reforms, and economic welfare, as well as how the state uses its coercive force responsibly, would matter whether or not it faces revolution. And finally, external factors influence revolution, but they do seem to serve mainly as triggering effects. And by triggering effects, we're referring to things such as wars that ignite the onset of social revolution. External factors may also, as in the case of Soviet Union's assistance to the Chinese communists in the 1930s and 40s, facilitate revolution. We're also going to be looking at two patterns of revolution, which the author is referring to as spontaneous and planned. That's where revolution is ignited without any significant organized effort. This can happen, okay? It can. A good example of this is the Russian Revolution of 1917, where guerrilla-led revolution occurred. An example of planned revolution would be the Chinese Revolution of 1949. We can distinguish between the onset and success of revolution. While the success of revolution heralds the transformation of the old political and economic order, onset refers to the initial popular uprisings. The contention is that the success of social and political revolutions comes right after the onset of revolutions. Success in spontaneous revolutions does seem to occur when the military is acquiescent and or supportive of popular uprisings. I have a video talking about why we shouldn't make enemy of the police. Why don't we want to turn the police and the military against us? Why is it important that the men with the guns always view us as their family, their friends, their people? Why? Because if they are acquiescent and support popular uprisings, there's greater success in spontaneous revolutions. Success in planned revolutions, on the other hand, tend to happen where the military is defeated by guerrilla fighters. This does happen. In addition, organizational strength, resources, popular support, and ideology seem to matter for the success of planned revolutions. Let's look at theories of revolution next. Modern social science scholarship on revolution is both vast and diverse. Davies and Gurr are the two scholars who are generally credited for the development of what is known as the socio-psychological theory of revolution. Individual behavior takes front seat in these theories. Let me repeat that. Individual behavior takes front seat in these theories. According to Davies, revolutions occur when long-term socio-economic development is followed by short-term and sharp economic reversals. Does that remind you of something? More specifically, as people experience improving economic conditions over time, they come to expect that they will be able to obtain more and more. When the sharp reversal in economic fortune comes, ability to obtain goods declines, while people's expectations as to what they believe they should be able to obtain continue to rise. This is why we see inflation. Why do we let inflation run amok? Because it's really important to not upset that balance, because it triggers revolution. The balance between you regularly expecting that you should be able to obtain more and more, and the reality that the system doesn't support it. Hence why we have credit cards and debt. It allows you to obtain more and more. It's a false sense of obtainment because you really can't. You're really not in the position to obtain more and more. So they let you accumulate debt to prevent that trigger. that revolutionary trigger. The gap between what people are able to obtain and what they believe they should be able to obtain grows and turns into a crisis of rising expectations, and unhappy, unsatisfied, and frustrated individuals then resort to political violence. While Davies' J. curve theory of revolution seems to have had some value in explaining revolution, it doesn't necessarily clearly embrace political reasons as explanatory variables. Not all revolutionaries are affected by economic woes. Corruption, lack of political freedom, and issues of political participation may well be high in the minds of the middle class and urban dwellers before and during revolutions. Gurr's theory of relative deprivation refers to individuals' perceptions of the discrepancy between the standard of living that they believe deserving and the standard of living that they are actually capable of achieving. When the deprivation is intense, so there's a great gulf between what you feel you deserve and what you have, what communities do we see that in? When the discrepancy is intense and the deprivation is intense, anger, frustration, and political violence follow. Gurr also includes political variables such as legitimacy and institutionalism and to explain civil strife. However, while deprivation could factor into affecting revolution, it doesn't clearly connect this variable with its possible cause, the economic development process. And when we see radical minds or just crazy people like Hitler, Stalin, when we see them pandering to a revolutionary mindset, these are the things that they consider. These are the triggers that they use. Do you know what I mean? These are the triggers that they use. This is what they point to set off and ignite people's minds. Johnson's theory of equilibrium asserts that value-coordinated behavior among the people of a given society leads to political stability. Specifically, socialization. Socialization helps the perpetuation of values and norms. Why is it important that your kids be educated in government schools? Because socialization helps the perpetuation of values and norms, which lead to the presence of trust and confidence among the people and a moral community. Government also ought to be legitimized for the societal values and norms to hold. To the extent that social, economic, and political systems stay in balance and change in equal proportions, as well as evolutionary, political stability would be guaranteed. We are looking at a painting of our society. If you wonder, Irene, why do you bother? Like, why are you bothering with these lives? With all this chitter chatter, like, what is the purpose of it? Nobody cares to hear it. We don't like listening to this crap. We like the sensational stuff. Why? Because we have to understand the inner workings of the system. We have to understand this. We have to understand why our society looks the way it does. I was on a panel, and ABL pointed to the destruction of the family having something to do with welfare. He pointed out WIC and some other things, and I said, you think that welfare has anything to do with anything other Then pacification. WIC has anything to do with anything other than pacification? Any program supported by the Office of Human Capital has anything to do with anything other than pacification? Free school, you think they really care about educating the kids? No. Nobody cares about anybody. They don't care about us. What they care about is that socialization helps the perpetuation of values and norms, which lead to the presence of trust and confidence among the people. A moral community. They care that government be legitimized for the societal values and norms to hold. Because to the extent that social, economic, and political systems stay in balance and change in equal proportions, you know what I mean? The Democrats get a chance, the Republicans get a chance, everybody gets a chance to lead. Everybody feels represented, right? The systems stay in balance and they change in equal proportions, as well as evolutionary political stability would be guaranteed. This is the recipe for pacification and stupefaction. Do you want to be stupefied? Do you want to stupefy? Do you want to pacify a group of people? This is how you do it. This is how you do it. This is how our society is built. That's why I'm having this live. Who's taken the time to sit back and think about this? Aristotle take a large class. The Western world is built on their philosophers. To take a large middle class, they will have no reason to revolt. Socialize them. Perpetuate certain values and norms. Switch up the leadership so everybody feels they got a shot. Legitimize the government so that your societal values and norms hold, and political stability is a guarantee. It's manipulation. It's a recipe. We live in a recipe. It's like baking a social cake. Because revolutions only occur when disequilibrium and value congruence exists. Political leaders could restabilize the system by making some reforms. Isn't this what we do? Y'all, tell me right now. Are we having a conversation? Is this what we do? Looks like the people are getting a little tight. Reform. How many times have you heard that in your lifetime? Reform. So and so reform. Why the reforms? Because they see you're tight. So if they reform to pander to what they think you feel is important, oh, you'll stop being tight. Oh, they listen to us. We got to reform. My neck's not sweating anymore. Guess I won't revolt. Political stability. This is the recipe. See, we have to understand what we're living in. Because it's not enough, and I guess I could have saved this conversation for my, are you really awake and aware of what's going on? You know, people, I'm woke. Are you? Do you even understand what's going on? Being woke is not just being contradictory. Okay, that's not what that's about. That's why I hate the term woke. You feeling a little bit disgruntled and being willing to voice that and talk about the things you hate is not being awake. That's not being awake. Having an understanding. Walking around the world, you know, there's that movie where the guy puts on the glasses and then he can see all the aliens and he can understand all the hidden messages and everything. That's being awake. Fully having the comprehension of what you're living in. Walking into a bank and not seeing that as a place to keep your money, but seeing it for the manipulation that it is. Understanding that for 4 years you had a Republican president and for 4 years you got a Democratic president because it's supposed to make you feel like something changed. Because the feeling of representation is essential. We're getting into the nuts and bolts of this. See, they've known this since their ancient times in the Western world. This is how they do things. And I've said this in my lives before, but in this live, we're going to get into this in depth and in detail. It's not just going to be Irene talking about, don't you see, this is just how the Europeans do things. They've perfected the art of slavery. No, we're going to look at it in detail. Let's go over it again. The theory of equilibrium asserts that value-coordinated behavior among the people of a given society leads to political stability. Specifically, socialization helps the perpetuation of values and norms, which lead to the presence of trust and confidence among the people and a moral community. Government also ought to be legitimized for the societal values and norms to hold. To the extent that social, economic, and political systems stay in balance and change in equal proportions, as well as the evolutionary. Political stability would be guaranteed with that recipe. Revolutions occur only when disequilibrium and value congruence exists. Political leaders could restabilize the system by making some reforms. Because if they don't, revolution, facilitated by accelerators such as military mutiny and guerrilla warfare, would break out and force the system to change into a new equilibrium. Why do they seek faux equilibrium? Why do they seek it? Because if they don't put out faux equilibrium, the people will create equilibrium. On the surface, Johnson's argument seems logically consistent. However, Johnson seems to overstate the existence of equilibrium in social systems. For instance, can we really say that there is value congruence amongst people in all kinds of regiments? In traditional societies, the peasantry could be exploited by the landed classes. But the former classes, although resentful of this way of life, may still stay peacefully for long periods of time. In other words, in the absence of violence, may not imply the presence of value congruence. Put differently, Johnson seems to conflate value congruence or equilibrium with political stability. What are they saying? You can get away with screwing a few people over for a good period of time. You don't have to have value congruence across the board. Because there's a group of people you can keep in the dirt and they'll stay there. So then what else can we look at? And I think, how long are we into this live? And I'll decide if we're gonna keep going or not. I don't want to make it too long, y'all. I want you guys to be able to take this in one sitting. So if I make it too long, you know what I mean, then I run the risk of not being able to do that. So we are, how many minutes into this are we? Let me see. We're 30 minutes into it. Okay, we'll go a little bit deeper, just a little bit. But I'm not going to keep you guys for super long, okay? I'm not. So, all right, let's just take a look. We'll go a little bit further. We'll look at Huntington And after Huntington, we'll have to pick this up on the part 2, because this is going to be a lot of information. A lot. So let's take a look at Huntington. Huntington relies on the modernization theory to explain social revolutions. According to him, revolution is an aspect of modernization. His main argument is that modernization, specifically social mobilization and economic development, leads to political awareness. Consequently, the people being educated and urbanized start to demand greater political participation. If political institutes do not allow or establish mechanisms for the incorporation of the mobilized people, political violence, including revolution, is possible. There's some truth to all this, right? Why do you think they had the young Black Republicans at the White House? What's the purpose? What's the purpose of that? Why did they let a couple Indians and a couple Black people and a Mexican or two into the House and Senate? Why did they do that? They did it because the people being educated and urbanized start to demand greater political participation. And if they don't allow or establish mechanisms for the incorporation of the mobilized people, then political violence, including revolution, is possible. This is not about, we don't have our token Black boys and token Native Americans and token whoever's in positions of power because society has progressed. They are in positions of power, the tokens. That's why there's so few of them. Because it gives you the feeling that you are able to have political participation. And then you're not going to want to revolt, just straight up. You're cool with it. Oh, look, that person looks like me. They get a vote. Well, then I'm represented. I've got greater political participation. There's a Black caucus. Look at that. Black people are represented. Nothing to see here, no reason to be mad, everything's fine. Back to your regular scheduled stupefying programming on your television. In other words, similar to Johnson, revolution is caused by a gap between political mobilization of the people and the inability of political institutions or their failure to continuously adapt, to absorb the mobilized masses into politics. In addition, not inconsistent to Davies and Gurr's analysis, Huntington also contends that the gap between people's expectations and satisfactions, aspects of social mobilization and economic development, respectively, can be used as a measure of political instability. In effect, Huntington links the equilibrium theory of Johnson and the socio-psychological theories of Davies and Gurr by stating that the gap between expectations and satisfactions is caused by the absence of opportunities for social mobility and adaptable political institutions. Huntington is credited for bringing the importance of political institutions in the explanation of revolution. Y'all, they study this. Do you hear what I'm saying? They've researched this. This is not a game. They have researched all of the possible things that could occur to make people want to be revolutionary. They've looked into this. This is serious. They have obsessively picked apart this game. And they know that everybody's too busy living their lives to be smart enough to see that they are being played. that they have researched, studied, and anticipated all the things that are going to push you over the edge, and they take you right to the edge and then they pull you back. You catch your breath and you're cool. And then they let you go to the edge and they go, oh, look at them. They're on the edge. They're about to revolt. Oh, let's pull them back. They've studied this. First, he seems to suggest that social mobilization and economic development independently and directly affect revolution. It seems that the casual arrow should point from economic development to social mobilization to revolution. In other words, economic development seems to influence social mobilization, and social mobilization would potentially lead to revolution. Second, Huntington seems to overstate the importance of political participation. For instance, he credits Leninism and Lenin's Communist Party for making possible the political participation of millions of Soviets. It seems to Huntington, the more people participate in a political system, and regardless of the regimen type, the better. However, as Allman and Verba argue, too much popular participation may, in fact, interfere with the tasks of governance as well as the daily activities of the people. Hear what I'm saying. Why are there only tokens? Are we listening to what's being said here? Why will you never have heavy representation in politics? Did you hear? Why not? Too much popular participation may, in fact, interfere with your bosses, interfere with the tasks of governance. See, because you're not there, you're not represented to effectually change anything. You are represented so that you are comfortable. You are represented so that you shut up. But your representation should never be so high that you can interfere with the tasks of governance or the daily activities of the slaves, your fellow slaves. I want to get into Tilly, but I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to stop because it's late, y'all. But I just want you guys to really think about this, okay? Think about this. I don't know, like if you have time, play it in your sleep. Play it when you're driving, home. Download this to your download so that if you don't have an internet connection, you can just listen back through it. And not to me so much, to the concepts. These things have been studied. This is how our society is built and designed. The world you live in is contrived. This is not by accident. You hear me quoting them. This is what they do. They have mastered the art of making you not want to change shit. Excuse my French, they have mastered this. And till we understand what's going on and we recognize the shenanigans for what they are, we cannot claim to be enlightened or awake. This isn't some new age weirdness where we all, burn sage and eat vegan and do yoga and pat each other on the back for how awake we are and how in touch with spirituality we are. No, wake up. It's not about that. It is about having awareness and a true understanding. I'm Christian. The Bible says everything you do it with the understanding. We have to understand what is happening. We have to understand the system that we live in. We have to understand that they have studied this to perfection. They have perfected this. And know the difference between true progress and representation and effectual action and BS that's meant to keep you from complaining while people do what they want. When we talk about teaching our children, I always talk about for the school, I want to have school books that teach from an Afro-centered perspective. I want to talk about this. How many of you covered this in school under politics? All the research they've done into governmental structures and societal structures to design the political system that we live in. Is that covered in school? I don't think so, not even at the AP level. Why is it not covered? How many of you have heard of any of the men I mentioned today? Any of these men? Have any of you heard of any of them? Other than Aristotle? Why is that? It's just some food for thought, you guys. Like I said, I'm going to pick up and do part 2 of this here on YouTube. I might do the rest on my Patreon. It depends, because it's going to get deep, y'all. It's going to get deep. We talk about vibrating higher. We think this is some cosmic, fluty, tutti frutti mess. If I ever use the term vibrate higher, I'm not on some new age stuff. I'm like, think. Be thinking. Jot down the people that I mentioned today and go research them, read their books, understand, study your enemy. Know what the tools to your slavery are. No. Understand them. Turn off the frickin' TV and get a handle on this, because there is no combating something you don't understand. There is no rebuilding something that you don't understand how it works. How do you tear down and rebuild something with no understanding but passion? Passion is a beautiful thing, but passion is not enough. There must be pragmatism, there must be wisdom, there must be knowledge. And these stupid arguments over if we're Aboriginal, or if we're Israelite, or if we're Christian, or if we're, you know what I mean? None of this is going to have anything to do with any effectual change. You know what will? Understanding what we're in and understanding what it takes to rebuild, because propaganda can be used for good or evil. Only a fool. There's a scripture that says, who goes to war without counting the cost? That's in the Bible. Only a fool. Only a fool. You don't count the cost? There's another scripture in the Bible that says, in the counsel of many make war. In the counsel of many. Maybe I'll use that for my scripture for tomorrow, make war. We're taking counsel. We need to understand. If you're a homeschooler like I am, these are useful things for the teaching of history, for the teaching of social studies. This is what they didn't tell you in school. But these are their philosophers. So let me go through one more time just for y'all, so you don't have to catch it on the playback. Who did we cover today? Let's take a look at it. We looked at Aristotle. Okay, so this is going to be the synopsis, y'all. Hold on. This is going to be the synopsis. I'm going to say who we looked at and what they said, and we're going to move quick here so that I can get off of here and you guys can all go to sleep. We looked at Aristotle. His argument was that if you had a large middle class, there would be no good reason for anybody to ignite revolution, okay? We looked at Eckstein, who argued that external factors could influence revolution, but there could be triggering effects, such as wars, that might facilitate revolution. We looked at Davies and Gurr. They are mainly credited for the development of what we call socio-psychological theory of revolution. What they essentially argued was that as people experience improving economic conditions, they tend to expect that they will keep improving. So you have to create a system where they always have faux economic upward movement. That's why we have banks. That's why we have debt. That's why. Not because anybody cares about you. It's not about consumerism. Y'all think it's about consumerism. Nobody gives two craps if you consume. It only matters because as long as you can consume, you are acquiring things. There's acquisition, which makes you feel that you are upwardly mobile. Because lacking that feeling will make you revolutionary. Looking at Davies and Gurr. Tying into Davies was Gurr and his theory of relative deprivation, which essentially pointed to the discrepancy about what you think you ought to have and what you really can achieve. And that gulf can never be too great. This goes into why our financial systems are the way that they are. We looked at Johnson's theory of equilibrium, which asserted that value-coordinated behavior among the people of a given society leads to political stability. This is the one that's really tricky. Why do you have public schools? Why is it mandatory? Why are they so obsessed with the programming? Because socialization helps the perpetuation of values and norms, which lead to the presence of trust and confidence among the people and a moral, quote unquote, community. In addition to that, government has to be legitimized so that the societal values and norms will hold. Why? Because to the extent that social, economic, and political systems stay in balance and change in equal proportions, meaning we all get represented. The Democrats get a turn, the Republicans get a turn, and if the Green Party gets too deep, they'll get a turn too. Because as long as the political systems change in equal proportions and appear to be evolutionary, they can achieve political stability. It's almost guaranteed. It's disequilibrium that pisses people off. You got to feel like you're represented. We looked at Huntington. Basically, he said, people get educated, they get urbanized, we stop treating them like crap, they're going to expect to have greater political participation. So we got to let them in, because if we don't, they're going to get pissed off and revolt. But mind you what he said, or what Almond and Verba said, right? Almond and Verba came behind Huntington and they were like, we can let the people in, but we don't want them to have too much representation, because letting them in isn't about giving them a vote. Letting them in is about shutting them up. So if we let too many of them in, they're going to interfere with the tasks of governance, and we can't have that. They're going to interfere with the daily activities of the people, and we can't have that. We just need tokens so that they feel represented, because educated and urbanized people need to feel that they are represented and have a voice. That's why we take a vote, but we don't count the popular vote. It's not one person, one vote. There's a whole group of people, the Electoral College, whose names you don't get to know, who can vote any way they want. Why? Because the popular vote is there so that you feel represented, you feel like you did something. And the Electoral College is there to do what the hell they want. If it works with the people, fine. But we know from experience and history, sometimes the Electoral College doesn't go with the popular vote. Why is that? Because too much popular participation, this is Almond and Verba, too much popular participation may in fact interfere with the tasks of governance as well as the daily activities of the people. And then the last, no, I think that's where we ended off. And next time we're going to start with Tilly. So that's who we covered. I encourage you to read the writings by those individuals. I encourage you to try to understand the systems in depth. Again, passion is fine, but this is not about passion or emotion. We need to merge passion with pragmatism and knowledge. We're not all sitting here saying, and on some extra spiritual stuff. Like, I love the Lord, y'all, but you know what? I need brains on. We need our minds working. Like I said, it's not some new age weirdness. This is serious. And like I said, this is great for us to have as adults, but if you're homeschooling, when you are teaching political structure, social studies, and things like that, this is what they're not teaching in school. This is what we need to get into at an early age. When we talk about how the government is set up, we need to be looking at this because this plays a part in how the political system works. This plays a part in how the schooling system works. This plays a part in how our monetary system works. It's all of these ideas that are coming together to form the world that we live in. And why? To quell revolution. And so this is an interesting conversation that we're having. Again, we're taking a look at social revolutions, their causes, patterns, and phases. And I just want to tell you guys that I hope you guys have a nice night. I'm sorry that I haven't been looking at the chat. I needed to reference my source. And yeah. Just want to say goodnight to you guys, okay? It's late. Get some sleep, people. Bye-bye.